There's only 24 hours in a day. I got a pair of earbuds and I wish there was a way that I could know just what I want to listen to. There's 150,000 shows that I'm not sitting through. When the world is dark and boring, let us do your exploring. Pod on pod. Pod on pod.
Welcome to Pod on Pod, a guide to the world of podcasts because it's not your daddy's radio. We're your hosts.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Joel. Welcome back, my friends, to Pod on Pod, a show where every week we review a different podcast.
Well,
what's that?
almost every week.
Almost every week. You're right. We have skipped a couple, I suppose. 2 weeks out of, what is coming up swiftly on a year here. That's pretty fair. And then the other thing is we did that whole month where we did 2 reviews a week. So, there's some bonus. We got some lanyard going. But mostly what we do is we come back every Wednesday and we review a new podcast for you to help you find your next favorite show. There is a wealth of free entertainment out there for you in the podcast world, and it's really hard to get through. There's a lot of great shows, but there's a tremendous amount of not so great shows too. So we try to find some new shows every week to highlight for you. This week in particular, we're going to be discussing a show called Hello Internet.
Was this a listener-submitted show?
It was, and I don't know who submitted it. I don't have the notes.
What was great about this particular show, I didn't have a clue what it was, didn't have any idea who the hosts were going in.
Here I found it. Brandon Porter, as a matter of fact, submitted this one. He also submitted the still untitled Adam Savage project, but he suggested that we check out Hello Internet, hosted by CGP Grey and Brady Haran, who both make a living on making educational YouTube videos. So this is an interesting show, Josh, and we're going to get right into it here. Every week on Pod, we break the show down by talking to you about audio quality, host likability, production values, and then the content itself. We also give you an overall rating. We rate things here on Pod with earbuds. We tell you a few of our favorite moments, and then we show you where you can find more about this show in case we've piqued your interest. Last week, we talked about a show called The Last Gentleman.
Yes.
And you and I had a great conversation about what is the most common show on the internet?
2 white guys talking.
About random topics,
Yes.
about the news of the day and whatever comes to their mind. And here, 1 week later, we've got another 2 white guys talking to each other about random things that come up in the news of the day.
So I thought about that. And I was like, man, we've got to get some more diversity in the shows that we're reviewing. Although I do feel like the amount of shows we're reviewing versus diversity, it's probably pretty close to what the percentages are out there in the podosphere.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It's a male-dominated landscape. It's a white dominated landscape. It's a American dominated landscape. Podcasting is very popular in lots of different countries around the globe, but American white males is the dominant force in podcasting.
So I've got a podcast.
Okay.
That's got 2 female hosts.
All right.
And so that'll break some things up. But here's the deal. I don't know a way for us to discuss the show other than to make it an explicit show. And here's why. The actual title is Guys We F***ed, the anti-slut shaming podcast.
You just told me about this show earlier tonight. My interest is piqued, no doubt whatsoever. I'm very excited about it. I would like to know what our audience thinks about it. We've got an episode coming up. We've done one review already where we prefaced it. We don't curse on the episode, but we say, hey, this show we're going to talk about potentially some adult subjects. It was the Sick and Wrong podcast when we reviewed that. We said maybe if you listen to this show generally with the kids in the car, this isn't the episode to do that for. Next week, well, not next week, but a couple of weeks down the road for Valentine's Day, we're going to be reviewing the Savage Love Cast. And again, that's another one. We've got some adult subject matter to discuss, sort of. We may not curse on it, or probably won't curse on it, but that still is not an episode that you're going to want the kids in the car. If and when we do Guys We F***ed, that's definitely going to be an episode where we're going to have to take the kid gloves off, so to speak, a little bit.
Oh, no, I kind of only want to do it
if you can just be dirty.
Yes.
All right. Well, I would not be opposed to having one explicit episode.
Well, because we try to get, every one of our shows is going to be just slightly different and usually the delivery because we want to bring in part of the show, the feel of the show that we're doing.
Yes.
Sometimes we'll be a little more argumentative, different things like that. So I think the only way to do this show and keep that element is we have to be explicit.
So how do we, well, I suppose we'll take all responses. You can email us, of course, podonpod@teamprocreate.com. You can tweet us @podonpod, or you can post on our Facebook page, facebook.com/podonpod. That's all the places you can find us social media-wise.
And I would say you hashtag it yes or no.
All right, then. There you go. Hey, look, man, go ahead and let us know on social media what you think and whether you'd like to hear a review of this show. Guys, that can be coming soon if you're interested. This week, though, a much more a straightforward show. We're going to be discussing Hello Internet. And as I said, it is a chat cast. It's a generic chat cast between two white guys. What makes this one different, though, than the show that we reviewed last week, The Last Gentleman? Well, a lot of things make it different. First of all, these two guys are both
YouTubers.
Sort of internet presences. Yes, they're YouTubers.
Yes. I was excited.
CPG, is it CGP?
CPG Gray? No,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's difficult.
CPG Gray.
There we go.
Yeah. CPG Gray is his name. That's one of the guys. The other guy's Brady Haran. I'd never heard of Brady.
I've never heard of either.
I had heard of CPG Gray. I also have seen one or two maybe of his videos, but those two things were disconnected to me. I did not know that the video that I had seen was one of this guy's. I had heard the guy's name, but I didn't remember that he was a YouTuber. Some of the blogs that I follow, some of the other podcasts I listen to, this guy moves in the same circles, and so there was some crossover there, but I didn't really have a great background with him. Now that I know who he is, his videos are tremendous. In particular, I have seen the video on the British government, like talking about the UK, which he mentioned in an episode that I listened to of this podcast, talked about some of the problems that he has in that video, and that if he had to do it over again, or if he ever gets around to making that video again, things that he would change. And the other video that I watched from him was about the Electoral College, I think. Both of them super informative. Entertaining. You know, he does they're all animated, so you don't ever see his face. And that's actually sort of a thing for a guy that is as well known as he is and has a following like he does on YouTube, and yet he's still very mysterious, I guess is the word. I don't know. He's offline. Like, he doesn't, people don't know. I mean, people now know what he looks like because he has started allowing photos of himself online. But for a long time, he literally would like actively patrol and remove photos of himself that appeared online because he wanted to protect his own identity, sort of, to a degree. I really respect that. And it's also strange in the internet age for someone who is an internet celebrity to also respect their privacy. It's weird.
Joel, what excited me whenever I found that out was, if you think back several months ago, we had a conversation about wanting to do a review of a podcast that a YouTuber had started, right? See what the crossover was. And I think the one that we were going to do was Grace Helbig's Not Too Deep, maybe?
That sounds familiar. We talked about also doing Getting Doug with High. Back when we reviewed Doug Loves Movies.
Yeah.
Because we both enjoyed his video cast more than his podcast.
True.
So there are a couple out there that I'd like to get to someday.
So I was excited that after several months, we actually finally got around to doing a review on a YouTuber crossing over to being a podcaster.
And both these guys, as we mentioned earlier, are YouTubers, and both of them with an educational bent. Brady Haran actually appears in his videos. I still haven't watched one of his YouTube videos. Once we finish this review, I am going to go check him out on a few of them. But he's not a guy that I was familiar with at all. Over the course of listening to this show, though, I think I ended up liking him more than CP. Maybe that's... I don't know why exactly that was. We'll get to it over the course of this show. So first of all, let's talk about audio quality. That's where we'll start for this one. I thought CPG Gray, his audio is pretty much perfect. Brady's at times sounds like it's not a great connection.
Well, no, I think that's him moving in and away from the microphone.
Oh, you think he's just got less solid mic technique?
Maybe.
Maybe so. I do know, though, that these guys do the double end Skype recording that we've discussed before. They both record their own audio track locally. They're doing the podcast over Skype, and then they combine those audio tracks separately. there's actually, and this is where I want to focus a little time and attention, because the combination, the area of audio quality and production values here, this is a great example of how this show differs from other generic white guy podcasts and even last week's show, The Last Gentleman. As well as that show is produced, those guys are not spending the time episode to episode that CPG Gray and Brady are. There's a blog post on CP's website, and I'm going to link this in our show notes and stuff on this post. But you can go and look. He details, you can actually watch a time-lapse video of him editing one episode of this show. It's 11 hours worth of editing shrunken down into a 1-hour video. That is a tremendous amount of work. It's much more work than you and I put in on any one episode of this show. It's more work than even... I know people, podcasts that I listen to, that say they do 3 or 4 passes of edits on their shows. But even then, you're talking about an hour and a half show, 4 times over. That's not 11 hours worth of editing.
Right, but he is a bit neurotic and... he's a perfectionist.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so does he need to put in 11 hours? No, not at all.
Probably not. They edit for content occasionally. Like they'll have a topic that doesn't really go anywhere, and they'll just dump that out of the show. He cuts out a lot of the uhs and the ums, not all of them, and I thought that was a great point, because when you cut them all out, and I don't cut out all of ours, I cut out some, I cut out the most egregious ones, but I leave a lot in because then it stops feeling like a normal conversation if you don't ever have those sort of verbal stutters. So he leaves in enough to make it sound normal, takes out all the ones that you could make fun of pretty much. And what it ends up doing is these guys both come out sounding like real professionals.
So here's my commentary on the audio, because we've talked about this topic so much, and the technique that they use really works for podcasts who sound great. We just need to come up with a name for that technique. Maybe there's one already out there. We just don't know what it is. Name it, and then we'll start using that going forward so that we don't spend, 2 minutes explaining the thing.
It's the double-ender Skype recording. That's what it is. It's the double-ender Skype recording. That's what they're doing. So let's move on then to production values. Minimal. You like the way they put the show together,
beautiful.
I bet.
Yes.
Nice theme music into the show. They use a sound effect occasionally in between segments as they're going from topic to topic. If there's been a big edit, sometimes you'll hear just a little flourish and then more conversation. I sort of hated it the first time that it happened. I was like, why do they do that? Then I realized they don't do it every time they switch conversations. They only put it there when there's been a serious edit to the show. And it makes, I don't know, for some reason it made the flow through much more understandable to me. Like I never got lost in a conversation because of it.
Sometimes simple is best.
Really. That's,
Yeah.
I mean, it goes, but it shows you that even the simplicity is hard work. Like I think part of the way that it comes off so easygoing is because he puts 10, 11 hours into every episode. So that moves on into the content itself. What do these guys discuss?
Well, here we go. So you and I were going to record this last week.
Yes.
And one of the problems that you had was how to describe it.
Yeah, I still have that problem, really. It's 2 guys sort of famous on the internet talking about the things that they like. And to put a more fine point on that, it becomes difficult for me.
I think, CPG Gray is also a teacher. Mm-hmm. And Brady is a journalist. So they both kind of have this educational quality when they speak or explain something that is fantastic.
Very straightforward.
Yeah, so...
easy to understand.
So I don't know if I wouldn't necessarily say that it's the topics they talk about are educational, but they look at problems like being wrong.
Yeah,
right?
That was the very first episode was being wrong on the internet.
Or feedback.
Yeah.
Right? And what's funny is they actually talked about feedback before they even released an episode and received feedback.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty brilliant too.
So, but it was something that, for me, a person who has done 2 podcasts, have been doing it for almost 5 years now.
Wow.
Total.
Yeah.
It is like they are deconstructing the thing that they are doing, right? So they want to do a podcast. Okay, well, what are some of the concerns you would have with doing a podcast? Oh, man, I would... being wrong, putting anything out there for the masses and being wrong is a concern. It's something that you think about. It's something, how do you plan against it? What's your philosophy on it? Are you okay with it? Because maybe it's something to be okay with. What's something else you're going to think about or worry about when you're doing a podcast? Feedback.
Right. Are you going to get any? Is it all going to be negative?
Do you put it out there? Do you put a segment of the show to it? What's helpful feedback? What's not helpful feedback? And listening to those shows early on, it was really cool because it was like they were talking about the issues that we'd talked about or we had to have tackled. So, and the way that they speak and the way that they deliver information and the rapport that they have back and forth, especially having one in Gray as being a teacher and then having the other one who's a reporter who's asking questions, right? Like that's his job. He interviews, he asks questions. It works really, really well.
It really does. We talked last week about that fine line of being just another podcast between two random white guys. And these guys, even though their notoriety didn't really rub off for you and me, since they're internet famous, but they're not really famous to us. We didn't exactly know who these guys were coming into the show. And yet the podcast still works, even though you and I aren't really fans or followers of them. And that is a tremendous testament to exactly how hard they work and how educational and informative and entertaining the two of them are as people.
And I found that it is topical in. So it's not topical to popular culture, right? It's not topical to what's going on, like the news.
Week to week, yes.
But it is. So if they talk about feedback in episode 3, they're going to revisit that in episode 4.
Yes, this is something that I ran into in this podcast too. I listened to episode 1, then I listened to episode 25. I went back and listened to episode 2, and then I listened to I think episode like 12 or 13, somewhere in there. And all of them were great. Very different, and there were several times where it was clear this was a continuing conversation from the episode before, and I'd sort of missed something. So this is one of those rare occasions where it's not a narrative podcast, it's not really a comedy podcast, and yet I may find myself going back and listening to them all over time.
Because it builds on itself.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
It really does. So, by the way, I did listen to those episodes, 1, 2, 25, and it was 12. Hamburgers in the Pipes was number 12. That's the episodes I listened to. Do you remember which ones you listened to?
I want to say I listened to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 28.
Episode 28 is the
New Year
next
episode.
Most recent episode.
Yeah.
Randomness in a Box was the name of that one.
Yes, that's the one I listened to.
So there you go. Those are the episodes that we listened to. That's sort of our general take on Hello Internet from CGP Grey and Brady Haran. They talk about YouTube, life, work, and whatever. That's the tagline for the show. You can find it at hellointernet.fm, by the way. Let's move on to some of our favorite moments. You got a particular favorite moment that you'd like to mention?
Yes, and it just happened in episode 28. I'm going to talk about it again because of the way that they record. CPG Grey is trying to match it up, so he has Brady clap 3 times.
Yes.
Right, and then he claps 3 times to sync everything, I guess.
I think the way that works is on the waveform, you can see the claps coming across both sides, and you line those up, and there you go.
So just to show the difference in personalities and things, I guess they've done this, but I guess they do this before every show, right? Mm-hmm. So Brady wants to do something different. He goes, you know what? I'll give you 3.5. And so he claps 3 times, and then you hear a very faint clap, right? And Gray, who is very like, this guy seems very by the books, like this is how things should be, and if I mess it up, it's because I didn't know, and now I do. But that's 4 claps.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's 4 claps. And then Brady's quick to go, no. I did 3 regular claps, and then I tapped my fingers into the palm of my other hand.
Yes, it was only half a clap.
Right. Which, okay, now CPG Grey has turned around to the idea of, okay, so let's just say, for argument's sake, that there is a such thing as a half clap. It wouldn't be you taking your fingers.
2 or 3 fingers,
It would be you clapping your fingers to your palm of the same hand. So that's a half clap. So what you did, okay, so sure, there's a half clap, but what you did wasn't a half clap.
You gave me 4. I asked for 3.5, and you gave me 4. That's funny. The last episode that I listened to, or the next to last episode that I listened to, which was episode 25, in that one, Gray tells him to give him 11 claps to start the episode. And he does. He gives him 11 claps in a row. Counts them right off. It was awesome. I was like, all right, there you go. So I didn't mention it. We sort of skipped over host likability there. I said in the beginning that I started the show thinking I was going to like Gray more because I did have some sort of familiarity with him. Over the course of the episodes, I fell completely in love with Brady. Brady's got a quick wit. He's very funny. He's much more easygoing than Gray is. Gray is almost neurotic, the level of perfectionism.
He is as straight as a straight man can be.
That's a good...
You know what I'm saying? Like if there's the straight man and there's the clown.
Yes.
He is the prototypical, like...
It's like an iron stud as opposed to a wooden 2x4, huh? That's...
Right. Like Brady is not like... He's not the most clownish you can clown.
Oh, I got you, yes. No, he's not a wild man. This is not morning radio or anything.
But CPG Gray is very...
By the book is the way you described him earlier. That's a pretty good way to put it. So there you go. That's our look at Hello Internet. Real quick, let's tell you what we thought about it overall and give you our rating for this show. My initial thought was I was going to give it a 2 because I just enjoyed it so much. I am subscribed, and not only am I going to listen to new episodes going forward, it's been added to my rotation. I'm probably going to go back and listen to. I'll catch up on some. I'll binge occasionally when I'm getting a hankering for something a little different. But this show is not for everybody. And it is another generic couple of white guys talking to each other about the things they like. And because of that, I'm beginning to like, okay, well, how many white guy podcasts can I have in my quiver to share with other people? And of my list of friends, there's only a handful of them that I think, boy, this is a show that such and such would really love, or this guy would really love. I like a lot of the things because I also work on the internet, because I am also behind the mic, because a lot of the topics that I've heard him cover so far, they're topics that are meaningful to my daily life. A lot of the quote-unquote civilians that I know, that wouldn't be the case. So for all of those reasons, I'm going to knock off a little bit. I'm going to give them 1.5 earbuds. And that's only because I don't think this is a podcast for everybody. It's a great podcast, not for everybody.
So I also really enjoyed it, and I think that it is not one I'm going to listen to every week, but man, for long car rides or travel, or when you have like large chunks of time, you know, you're going to generally be caught up on podcasts you listen to every week.
Yeah.
And this is a great one to have in the chamber.
Oh, I can listen to 4 or 5 episodes.
Right, because you're not caught up with it. I thought it was fantastic. Really enjoyed it. I was pleasantly surprised to finally listen to an review of a podcast that's created by YouTubers. So that was kind of cool. I also can't think of podcasts in the way that you just laid out. Like I can't change my opinion on something because, oh, there's so many podcasts with white guys, or it's hard for me to bring that into my judgment of something, because funny's funny, sad is sad, and either I'm going to like what I like and I'm going to hate what I hate. So it's a 1.5. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to probably recommend it to several people because the YouTube culture is fanatical. And I think that YouTubers being able to open that audience up to an audio version, to podcasting, I think is tremendous.
Well, I'm with you there too, and I'm kind of surprised that it got 1.5 from you. That's pretty impressive for anybody that's been following your scale there.
It's very, very good.
It is. It's a great show. Yes, hellointernet.fm is where you can find it. You can also find it, of course, on iTunes and Stitcher, etc. Before we wrap up the show, we got a little listener mail. First, this comes on our Facebook page, and you can find us at facebook.com/podonpod. Okay, so this comes on our Facebook page, and it's in response to our history podcast from a few weeks ago. This is from Nick Varney. Hey guys, I cited Dan Carlin for 2 essays I wrote in English.
Boom!
One was Constitutionality of Spying and History, Perceptions of Roman History. Those were the 2 papers that he wrote.
So how did he cite it?
His content wasn't my main source for citation. I used other academic sources too, of course. I messaged Dan on Twitter about citing him. He said I was very brave to do so. That's
fantastic.
He cited it directly. It wasn't his primary source. It was one of his secondary, but he cited it as Dan Carlin, Hardcore History, and the episode title with
Really?
links, I suppose. Yeah.
Oh, man, that's great.
So thank you for that information, Nick. We asked if anybody had used him for a citation, and there you go. I knew somebody out there had tried it. All right, the other listener feedback that we got this week comes from, this is from Mark, and this was an email. A great email. It's actually quite long, so I'm going to try to skip through this. We might have to edit it a little bit. Hi, Josh and Joel. A while back, I heard the episode where you guys got a string of upset listener feedback in response to one of your shows. Probably old news by now. It's been bothering me for a while, and I finally just decided to write you guys. I really enjoy the podcast. Keep your chins up. You guys make a great show. Don't let a few butthurt one-time listeners tell you otherwise. And I emailed him back. That, of course, is he's talking in response to the Rob Has a Podcast episode. That was by far the most feedback we've ever gotten, and almost entirely from his audience directly. He says, while I have your attention, though, I thought I'd also like to give you a little feedback because I'm assuming I represent at least a segment of your legitimate listenership. I like that he put legitimate in parentheses. First, I started listening to your podcast because you guys reviewed How Stuff Works, and they mentioned you in response. It sounds like you guys got a large boost in listenership from that. Then, since I've started listening to your podcast, I've picked up a few of your recommendations and started listening to those shows as well. What I noticed is that most of those podcasts see a pickup in their traffic after they're reviewed by your show. Anyway, I wanted to make a suggestion. Most podcasts ask their listeners to give their own podcast a review on iTunes or whatever. We do. At the end of the show, we say, hey, go review us on iTunes.
Yeah, it's a great way to show some love.
He said, in contrast, you guys might actually benefit more from telling your listeners to support you guys by actively reviewing other podcasts on iTunes. So, if every week the listeners of our show that check out, for instance, Hello Internet, if they go and review Hello Internet mentioning our show, his suggestion is that in the long run will gain us more because these shows will notice.
Yeah, so on the count of three, we're going to mention the show that we reviewed that we think the majority of our listeners checked out. On the count of three.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Mabim.
I was going to say Mabim too. I wanted to say
You were terrible.
I'm sorry.
at
I'm
this.
really
I
bad
even gave you
at
a countdown.
I know, but I don't know. I was kind of at a loss. I wanted to say Mabim, but I got to tell you, I think we may have actually made a difference for the Monat Dixon line too.
Yeah, right on.
It's a very obscure show in comparison
Oh,
to a lot
yeah,
of the
very.
other ones.
Yes.
It's a very niche audience. There aren't a lot of other shows out there like it at all. And I think there are a lot of people like you and me that are interested in checking that out once in a while. And it comes out so infrequently that it's not taking up space in your pod. Like even someone who doesn't listen to that many shows, that's one everybody can subscribe to.
Right, but we're gauging it differently. You're obviously going by percentage points, and I'm going by number of listeners.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so that was his first suggestion. He also said, I think you guys are thinking or thought about dropping the segment of the show where you give the reviewed podcast a new name. He says, first, I think that's a smart move.
You're welcome.
It was honestly clunky. Yeah, no, you're right. And you were totally right on that. Most of our jokes didn't hit. It wasn't a great idea. He says, but I would say you guys were onto something. The problem with a lot of podcast titles is they tell a person nothing about the show. Hello Internet says nothing.
The Last Gentleman podcast
Says nothing about the show. So he says, if you guys tried to come up with titles which were more descriptive, don't worry about a joke, just try to describe the show and name the show properly. If you did that, that might have some worth. He said, alternatively, what if you had a segment where you made the elevator pitch for the show, where you gave the 30-second, why would I listen to this show?
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's very much something that could work. He said one more idea along those same lines would be to do something at the end of the episode where you go, if you like podcast A, B, or C, then this show would be for you.
So this is the perfect email. This is the email that we love to get because it's ideas and criticisms that are going to help evolve the show. That's going to make the show a better experience for the listener, which is ultimately what we want to do.
Absolutely. And it continues even with his last suggestion. And I said I was going to edit this email. I didn't do it a whole lot, but here's a great one. This is all great stuff, so I wanted to share it with you guys too and get more feedback. If the listeners like what this guy is suggesting, what Mark's suggesting here, and you guys would like us to head in this direction, that's awesome. He says, one peculiarity of me, which may only apply to a small segment of your listeners, is that I really like it when you guys make observations observations on the specific design or scheme of a podcast. In this regard, you guys are similar to Song Exploder, which we've discussed before, the podcast that takes one song apart over the course of the episode, or even 99% Invisible, which I've only listened to one episode, but that's a podcast all about design. I think that's really unique, and now I mostly listen to your show for that. You guys have seen enough podcasts to articulate what makes the design of a show different. For example, I thought your discussion of Pauly Shore's Interested, coupled, interspersed interviews, etc. was really on point. Also, just this morning, I'm listening to your review of The Adam Carolla Show, and I thought the observations on long format shows was something I'd noticed, but perhaps never been able to put my finger on. Regardless, I wish you guys well. Keep up the good work. Mark, that is a great email, man.
Yes.
Made my day. Really appreciate that. And I do think he's on to something. Like you and I have a particular experience, which is just wallowing around in podcasting, just swallowing as much of it as we can.
The stench of it, like I walk by and people just know.
You just smell podcast coming off of me.
Right, like me walking around is like a porta potty.
Regular
See what I
porta
did
potty.
there?
A porta potty. Ah, that's nice. I like that.
It's terrible. It's
pretty
terrible.
bad. That's pretty bad jokes. That's why we're podcasters and not comedians, folks. Anyway, thanks so much for the feedback, Mark. And we'll think about that. We may try out that the elevator pitch segment on next week's episode. Speaking of,
definitely.
what are we going to review next week, Josh? The BS report.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I really wanted to do.
For
the BS report.
Okay, well, we're going to do the BS report because it's that time of year. It is football. The season is coming to an end as the Super Bowl is this coming up weekend, as a matter of fact. Or am I allowed to say maybe I have to say big game, I think.
Yeah, go with big game.
The big game is this weekend. But then also that transitions into basketball season. And, of course, Bill Simmons, the guy behind the BS report at ESPN, is a huge basketball nut, huge NBA guy and commentator and analyst. So it is the right season to get into that show. A very cool show in its own right. We'll talk about that next week. Until then, we want you to stop by podonpod.com. You can check out all of our archives. You can review Hello Internet for us on iTunes or Stitcher and tell them that we sent you their way, or review some of the other shows that you've started listening to because of Pod on Pod. I think that would be a great idea to help spread the word.
And if you are prepared for an explicit episode, remember, hashtag it yes or no.
That's right, folks. We're going to be, we want your feedback on whether or not to do a review soon of Guys We Until next week, we're your hosts.
I'm Josh.
I'm Joel. Keep listening.
Are you wanting something funny? Are you wanting something smart? A show on astral projection or the history of art? Do you want to learn a language or how to play guitar? Just leave it up to Joel and Josh. Pod on pod. Pod on pod.
Pod on Pod is a proud member of the Procast Network, a Procreate production. Procreate is a community of artists in film, music, the digital arts, and fine arts that helps them connect and collaborate on projects. You can find out more at teamprocreate.com. For more great podcasts from the Procast Network, check out Movie Buzzed. Every week, your host, Zach, and some special guests review a new film. It's time for good friends, a great movie, and a good buzz. The Pod on Pod theme song was written and produced by Adam Dale. You can find more information about him on our website. Our musical guest this week is Beach Language.